in Lhasa Tibetan. And there are two general goals for our study. First, we examine the structure and the interpretation of bare nominal expressions in Lhasa Tibetan, and how bare nouns become arguments in Lhasa Tibetan. So we have 5 parts. First, we look at background information and numeral construction, bare nouns, argument formation in Lhasa Tibetan, and then we conclude our study. First, I want to talk about the background information of Lhasa Tibetan. According to Dan Wood, Tibetan-speaking areas can be divided into 7 broad geographical blocks. This talk focuses on the language spoken in central Tibet, which is normally referred to as Wuchang dialect. Spoken Lhasa Tibetan is considered as a standard form of Wuchang dialect, and it is a SOV language. So Tibetan region can be roughly divided into 3 regions, Wuchang, Amdo, and Kham. And our Lhasa Tibetan is the representative of Wuchang region. There are 2 systems for transcribing Tibetan, Romanized transliterations and phonetic transcriptions. This study uses one of the well-established Romanized transliteration method, which is called Wiley transliteration. The data were collected by my consultant who worked with several native speakers of Lhasa Tibetan. First, let's look at numeral constructions in Lhasa Tibetan. Bare nouns in Lhasa Tibetan can combine with a numeral directly. For example, if we say book, it's just tep. If it's 1 book, tep ji, and 2 books, tep ni. Unlike Romance and Germanic languages, such as English, the nouns in Lhasa Tibetan do not have to be morphologically marked when they combine with numerals other than 1. So here we have 2 books, but this tep is still not morphologically marked for its plural form. Lhasa Tibetan is also unlike classifier languages such as Mandarin Chinese, which always require a classifier to connect a numeral and a noun. For example, in Chinese, we want to say 1 book or 2 books. We need to have a classifier, which is here is a band locating in between the numeral and the noun. But in Lhasa Tibetan, we do not have this classifier. When we add a demonstrative element to the numeral constructions in Lhasa Tibetan, the demonstrative element can appear either between the noun and numeral or to the right of the whole construction, numeral construction. For example, if you want to say those 2 books in English, we can say book that ni means tep te ni or tep ni te, book 2 that, for those 2 books. So te could appear in between the noun and the numeral or to the right of the noun and numeral. When previous examples further combine with an adjective phrase, the adjective has to immediately follow the noun. So if you have an adjective big here, those 2 big books, and this big, Chenbo, needs to follow this noun, should always follow this noun. So Chenbo cannot follow the demonstrative, Chenbo cannot follow the number. Also, we have seen that the demonstrative element can follow the numeral construction. So here, Chenbo needs to follow the book, and here the Chenbo cannot occur in any other places. It has been claimed that numeral constructions in number marking languages like English and French and classifier languages like Mandarin have 6 universal properties. Lhasa Tibetan, which differs from both numeral marking languages and classifier language, also exhibits these 6 properties. So let's look at the 6 properties. First, numeral constructions in Lhasa Tibetan can be used as predicates. So if you want to say Tashi and Zhiren are 2 students, so 2 students here, Labravani, 2 students here can be used as a predicate. Then numeral constructions in Lhasa Tibetan can be used as restrictors of demonstrative element or quantifier. So if you want to say Nima had those 2 students, those 2 students can be Labjavatini or Labjavanite. So we have, as mentioned, we have 2 choices here in Lhasa Tibetan, and both indicate that the numeral construction is the restrictor of the element te. Third, numeral constructions can serve as arguments with an indefinite interpretation. For example, Nima bought 2 books. So here 2 books. Temni could be an indefinite, could have an indefinite interpretation. Fourth, the argumental numeral constructions in Lhasa Tibetan allow a long-distance scope interpretation and exhibit island escaping ability. So here, if you want to say in English, if Nima hires 2 persons, so mini means 2 persons, he would become healthy. And here, this mini 2 persons can take either a narrow scope or a wider scope. So this mini can take a wider scope than if, or if can take a wider scope than mini 2 persons. Fifth, numeral constructions can receive a generic or individual level interpretation in generic sentences. For example, in English, if you want to say 3 boys can lift a table or 3 apples cost $2, those are generic sentences. And in Tibetan, we can also use the numeral construction to indicate the generic this interpretation. For example, 3 boys pusum and 3 apples kushusum. So we can use those numeral constructions to indicate generic interpretation. 6, numeral constructions in Lhasa Tibetan lack anaphoric use. For example, if you want to say, Nima bought 3 cats and 2 dogs. The 3 cats are expensive. So here, 3 cats, here is shimisum, and 2 dogs is kini. And this here, shimisum is just shimisum without this te cannot refer back to the shimisum in the preceding sentence. So we need to have one te demonstrative element te here to refer to be able to anaphoric. Then let's check the bare nouns in Lhasa Tibetan. We have looked at the numeral construction in Lhasa Tibetan. Here is bare noun. So this bare noun, lobsang labjawade. So lobsang is a student. Here, student can be used as a bare noun here to be a predicate. Also, bare nouns in Lhasa Tibetan can freely serve as arguments and appear in the subject position or the object position. For example, yesterday the children went to the park. And the children here, the bare noun children, buku, can be used here in the subject position. I saw a tiger. The tiger, da, can appear in the object position here. Third, bare nouns in Lhasa Tibetan receive a kind interpretation when they appear with kind level predicates. So if you want to say the bear is extinct, so this is one type of bears, and we can just use this tum, the bare noun tum, to indicate the kind interpretation. And then bare nouns in Lhasa Tibetan receive a generic interpretation in generic sentences. For example, dogs are clever. English, dogs are clever. And we can just use this bare noun ki to indicate the generic interpretation. The fifth property is that when bare nouns in Lhasa Tibetan occur in episodic sentences, they can receive a definite reading. For example, if you see a lot of cats running to a river and they are about to catch fish in that river, we can just say, so in English you say the cats will catch fish in the river. But in Lhasa Tibetan you can just use the bare noun shimi, which means the cat shimi, to indicate a definite reading. So the cats. The sixth property is that bare nouns in Lhasa Tibetan cannot receive a definite reading when appearing in episodic sentences. For example, in English, if you say there are 3 boys and 2 girls in the room, here we need to add the 2 girls, or the girls are students. There are 1 boy and 1 girl in the room, and we need to add this the girl is a student. So in Lhasa Tibetan, it's the same. So you want to say there are 2 boys and 2 girls in the room, and we cannot just use this bare noun, this pumo, to refer back to the 2 girls. We need to add that to, or we need to add that to here. When we say there is 1 girl and 1 boy and 1 girl in the room, here we also need a demonstrative element. So bare nouns cannot be anaphoric and refer back in episodic sentences. And so in English, as I mentioned, it's not allowed in English. So here, there are 3 boys, 2 girls in the room. We need to have the or the 2. There are 1 boy, 1 girl in the room. We need to have this, the or that. However, this phenomena is allowed in classified languages such as Mandarin Chinese. So there are 3 boys and 3 girls in the room, and we can just say, we can just use bare noun in Chinese. This is 女孩, bare noun is, we can use bare noun to indicate the 2 girls in Chinese. And also, if there is 1 boy, 1 girl in the room, we can also use the bare noun to refer back to indicate this one girl. The seventh property is that bare nouns in Lhasa Tibetan can combine directly with demonstrative elements. So if we want to say that book is tepte, this book tepti, and we can also have animate things like person. So that person mite and this person miti. The above phrases can freely occur in either subject or object position. So we can say that book is expensive, so tepte. That book is expensive. Or he wrote that book, so create that book here and jisong. So he wrote that book in object position. Then let's look at argument formation in Lhasa Tibetan. For bare nouns, there are two possible ways, two possible analysis for their argument formation. One is called a DP analysis in the syntax, which is proposed by Longobardi 94, or a type shifting analysis in the semantics, which is proposed by CeLCAR 98. So for this DP analysis, Longobardi proposed that in every language in the world, this NP is born as a predicate and needs to have a D, whether it's overt or covert. It needs to have a D to form an argument. And this argument will further combine with the verb. So this is his analysis. We always have a D, whether it's covert or overt. But for type shifting analysis, for this type shift, so for language, nominal structure differs from language to language. For some languages, this NP can be born as an argument and can combine with verb directly. For some languages, this NP is born as a predicate. But even though for those languages where NP is born as a predicate, it can be shifted, it can be converted into arguments without the help of D. So this D might not be necessary. So it occurs, but it's not necessary for every language in the world. So this is why semantic shifting in so this predicate can be shifted to arguments in semantics, not syntax. The paper supports the type shifting analysis by showing that Lhasa Tibetan does not have an overt determiner like the and in English. The demonstrative elements T and T are not determiners. So right now I'm showing two tests to test. They are not determiners. So the first diagnostic test is from Laubner. So Laubner proposes that a diagnostic test to separate true definites, which are true determiners, from demonstratives. For example, in English, the determiner the cannot denote a distal situation. So in English, we cannot say the boy is sleeping and the boy is not sleeping. Even though you are referring to two boys, you cannot just use the boy is sleeping, the boy is not sleeping. However, if you change the determiner with demonstratives, the sentence becomes acceptable. So you can say that boy is sleeping and that boy is not sleeping. Okay. To apply Laubner's test to Lhasa Tibetan, we can see that T and T behave as demonstratives rather than determiners and can denote a distal situation. So in Lhasa Tibetan, we can use this T and T to say that boy read a book and that boy did not read a book. As for diagnostic 2, Alex Schade et al. Showed that one obvious difference between determiners, definite articles, and demonstrative is that only the former can refer to kind. So we can say the dodo in English, the dodo is extinct, but we cannot say that dodo is extinct to refer to kind. When we apply this test to Lhasa Tibetan, the demonstrative elements T and T cannot combine with kind predicate. So here, for example, we have just seen the bear is extinct. We can use bear noun here to indicate the bear is extinct to refer to a kind. However, we cannot just use tongte or tongti to use demonstrative element here, which indicates that those are not determiners in Lhasa Tibetan. It's not like the English example here. So the two tests above show that T and T in Lhasa Tibetan are demonstratives rather than determiners. If there is no determiner in Lhasa Tibetan, it's not necessary to assume an element in the grammar Lhasa Tibetan to explain the behavior of the argumentation of bare noun. Bare nouns in Lhasa Tibetan can be argumentized via type shifting operation in semantics as proposed by CeLCAR and Yao. And then let's look at the derivation of the interpretation of bare nouns. The interpretations of bare nouns can be derived by adopting the ranking of meaning, this model under nominal mapping hypothesis. According to CeLCAR, there are three kinds of type shifting operations of bare nouns. First is kind formation, second interpretation of definites, and third interpretation of indefinites. And CeLCAR proposes that the semantic ranking among these operations is kind formation ranks over definites and indefinites. So people favor this kind formation over these definites and indefinites for bare nouns. Dayal argues that definites should have the same status as this kind formation, because it can also change the argument type without adding quantificational force. Her data is from 3 languages without determiners. So 2 number marking languages, Hindi and Russian, and 1 classifier language, which is Mandarin Chinese. The argumentation of bare nouns in Lhasa Tibetan supports Dayal's proposal, because we have seen the two. First, that bare nouns can be definites, and then bare nouns can be kind formation, indicate kind formation. To conclude, regarding numeral constructions, Lhasa Tibetan differs from numeral marking languages and classifier languages. The argumentation of bare nouns in Lhasa Tibetan supports the revised model of ranking meaning, and we add Lhasa Tibetan as a new set of language to the determinalist language that Dayal demonstrates. When we consider nominal argument formation generally in languages, Lhasa Tibetan as a representative of Tibetan languages cannot be an exception. Issues such as morphological number marking in Lhasa Tibetan will be pursued in the future. So those are my references, and thank you very much.
Chen for sharing his research with us. And now, if you have questions, you can ask about Lhasa Tibetan. Yes.
I thought that was a very nice presentation, very interesting. I guess you touched on this at the end, but does Lhasa Tibetan have overt plural marking? Can you and have you investigated how the plural interacts with
it has over plural marking, but that plural marking is called "co" in Tibetan, but that "co" is actually indicate definite things. So, but actually that is not. First, it's not necessary. Second, it indicates definite things. So it's like a definite marker. I think we also have the same thing in Chinese. We have men, and in Japanese they have tachi. So it's not necessary a plural marker.
Thank you.
Sure. You didn't talk about syntax, but my assumption, given your references, is that you just didn't have time to include it. So can I ask about that?
The
syntax? Yeah. So I mean, well, your references, like you have Boshkovich is left branch extraction cited here, and and also the orders that you gave at the beginning. What's possible for nominal expression, reminding me a lot of the roll-up kind of account that Anselm talked about yesterday in the Ezefet, or 2 days ago, whatever, in the Ezefet construction. So I just wondered if you could comment on the syntax of the nominal expressions, where things are and how you think that stuff is derived, and whether, and the left, whatever you have. I'm just curious to hear about it.
The syntactic structure.
Yeah. I mean, you argued very nicely against, that they're not a DP, that they're demonstratives and so on. But
right.
I just thought maybe if you had time, you could say something about how you get the different orders and what's possible and what isn't.
Oh, how do I get different orders?
I mean, you have the stuff you have on the second page.
Right.
Book. So it looks like the noun always rolls up ahead of the adjective. That thing can roll past or not past the numeral, but it has to go past the demonstrative.
Right. So actually, I haven't had time to look at the detail of the syntactic structure of this, but it's actually I think it's very interesting, because this demonstrative element can actually occur in between this numeral to and book, and sometimes it can also occur to the right of this numeral construction. But based on my consultation, many native speakers feel difficult to get this, but it's possible actually. It's possible to get this interpretation, but they feel difficult. Their preference is this construction.
Yeah, what I was thinking with the roll-up analysis we heard for the Ezefet construction was that, that the the noun goes past the adjective, that thing can move.
Oh,
It can either stop it can either stop, above the numeral and pick that up, and that whole thing rubs, and then that rolls up above the demonstrative phrase, or it goes directly in front of the demonstrative phrase, which is a less desirable thing given what you just said about speakers not liking it, which makes sense. It's sort of skipping a site. But I just thought you might have worked on it and left it out.
Right.
We could talk about it.
I think this kind of structure, is very interesting.
So then, is this what I'm going to say? Is this correct? So the demonstrative itself, however, can never occur in initial position of the nominal phrase. Is that true?
Right. So the noun goes first. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, please.
This is just a clarification question between examples 29 and 30. So
30.
for
this one,
29, it seemed you said when bare nouns appear in episodic sentences, they can receive a definite reading. And then for 30, you say when bare nouns appear in episodic sentences, they can't receive a definite reading, which is
okay.
What do you mean?
Sorry. What I'm meaning here is if appear in episodic sentence is like episodic context. Sorry. So I mean it's an episodic context. So within that context, you refer to something. And here we have two sentences here. For these two sentences, this one cannot refer back to the preceding sentence. But for this one, it's because context, so it can get definite reading in the context. Sorry.
What kind of context?
Right. So here, if both of us see a lot of rats run into the river and they are about to catch fish over there, and I will just say, in English, you will say the cats will catch fish in the river because both of us have already seen them, right? You say the cats, but in Lhasa Tibetan, you can just say this shimi. So that's why it gets a definite reading within that context. Yeah, thank you very much for pointing this out. Yeah, it's within this episodic context.
So I had the same question,
Okay.
but now it became slightly more confused. So let's say you have a situation like 30 or 31,
okay.
where you see those students,
Right.
but only the two girls are running up to the river to catch fish.
Right.
Will you need the determiner in that situation, where you actually have the ergative marker?
If we don't have this, if we don't have this, I think
You do have this, but they're in the room, and then you see the girls running to the river to catch fish. Would you still need to overtly?
Right. If I have already said this sentence, I need this one. Right.
So it's a situational.
Right.
And there's nothing about animacy here. It's just the fact that I already counted the number of girls that makes me have to use the determiner.
If there were
You mean-
books or an inanimate object, would you have to still use it?
I don't think animacy plays a role here. So either animate or inanimate things, we need to have this to refer back here.
And you will have the ergative marker on top of the noun phrase, like as a clitic, like it usually is.
So the ergative marker depends on the verb.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm saying. If the second verb instead of be will be would catch fish in the river, like would catch fish. So those two girls would catch fish.
Right.
Would you still have to use the determiner?
Right. Here, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Huh.
Right. Because
Very
of
cool.
Right, because of this catch. Yeah.
So you would have to use the
Catch,
determiner
Right.
and the ergative
Ergative here. Right.
and the determiner.
Right. And no determiner. Right.
No determiner.
And so ni and then one here.
Oh.
Right.
Ah, very cool.
Right.
I'm still confusing. Thank you.
Good.